Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon and welcome to the NWU webinar, where we focus a little bit on the work of AUTHeR, a research unit that offers a little bit more than just an interesting take on research methodology or a mere taxonomy of the different methodologies you might employ within the health sciences. Their work are both esoteric, theoretical, and practical. You'll see all of it this afternoon. They host a fascinating group of people, and this group of people, the experts, are all headed by the director, Professor Petra Bester. So we're going to start off, ladies and gentlemen, with Professor Bester, but you know that you are more than welcome to post questions. We can see all the comments that you post, so we'd like to relay the questions that you pose to the different experts. They'll most probably be able to answer all of them, and if they can't, we'll phone someone. But I'm sure we'll get round to your question. Ladies and gentlemen, then to kick things off, the director of AUTHeR, Professor Petra Bester.
Good afternoon, and such a warm welcome that you are willing to come and spend some time with us and with me for this next few minutes to discuss a bit of transdisciplinary research. These words, transdisciplinary research, transdisciplinary health research, and transdisciplinarity. What do they mean? And why do we need to do this type of research? But today we want to zoom in and actually end off very practically to help you to identify what criteria will make a researcher an ideal partner or team player in transdisciplinary research. So I want to take you over now to my PowerPoint slideshow, and this will be a combination of informal conversation, but a little bit of detail about what you can expect from us today. So firstly, transdisciplinary research is extremely context-based. So allow me, when I start off, to set the table for us. I'm going to set the tone, and we will all do some imaginary work to be in the same research problem. How does that sound? And we will apply this discussion to the very same setting. Then I want to help us understand how do we move from pure research. So we will take our problem, we will look at it from a pure research perspective, applied research perspective, and then that one step further going into the transdisciplinary research perspective of the very same problem. Only then will I burden you with the comprehensive definition of what is transdisciplinarity, because I hope by then you will almost get this gut feeling that we speak the same language. You can now understand what is meant by transdisciplinarity. Hopefully, when we can reach this consensus that we know what transdisciplinarity means, we can then ask ourselves, why is transdisciplinarity then necessary? And we will show briefly an interplay between three types of knowledges that we have to acknowledge during transdisciplinary research. We're going to have this transdisciplinary process. We will look at the research process and then the transdisciplinary research process to show a bit of difference, giving you some feedback on the challenges that you might experience, and then how do you want to let your ideal transdisciplinary research team member look like? So setting the table today for us to discuss transdisciplinary health research, I simply decided on Saturday, 28th September, I'm going to look at what's happening in South Africa today, because I think 21st century, just opening up any form of newsroom will open up so many realities of the context that we find ourselves. So although I won't open these websites for you today, I can just briefly state that imagine with me, we sat here together and we read the news. And we found that South Africa is preparing. We see a surge in the COVID pandemic, the prevalence of COVID positive patients again. We know that we are in lockdown level 1, But we can, in any time, if we see an increase in infections, now go to a process whereby there will be an increase in lockdown levels according to the region. Can you imagine the difficulties at this present moment where we heard today that there's over a 2.5 million more people that became jobless in the lockdown phase? And what do we see? The reality that lockdown will increase even more. Or we can go to the second news bulletin, very interesting. A primary school in Midrand, apparently built in 1977 without approved building plans. Now, this school apparently was built on a wetland. And today you've got the school built on a wetland with a major socio-political aspect linked to it. That's story number 2. Story number 3 is, it's indicating to us how we have extreme corruption in our current society in South Africa. Corruption of various forms, specifically regarding PPE. And as the COVID pandemic actually cast a magnifying light on it. And then, of course, we can go to so many sources and we can review the growth in our COVID cases in our country, our mortality rate, and how COVID is especially growing in areas where people have chronic diseases, lack of proper sanitation, lack of proper housing, poverty, unemployment. So welcome. This is the context that you will spend time with me today. So I want you to look at the slide that you've got in front of you on the screen right now. And that's where I want to say welcome. This is our office. This is our studio where we will do transdisciplinary research today. Because transdisciplinarity is when we face so many uncertainty. We don't know. It's uncertain. We don't know. Will next week be a disaster state or will it be back to level 2? We don't know. It's a place of constant change. We don't know yet about COVID, what we don't know. What does that mean? In this uncertainty, all of us learn new things about ourselves and about how we respond to this pandemic. Things that we didn't even know, we did not know 2 weeks ago. We also see that there's this mismatch between the knowledge outside in the scientific world against what are the needs experienced within society. There is this mismatch and there's a tension because we have a knowledge society. People have access to information. People want to know what's the outcome of research. And then as you can see in that picture, there are multiple stakeholders. Getting solutions for problems in that setting, if there are problems, impact on different stakeholders. People have many things at stake at what's happening there. We also know that the traditional form of research, and there's a traditional sequence of identifying a problem, taking your methodology, getting your results, and now take your results and put that into action, whereby it's a publication or a conference presentation, does not matter. That traditional sequence of research is not today enough anymore to address the complexities that we see above. We need to get new pathways where our research not only help us to describe these complex problems, but we don't have time. We need to get solutions and knowledge that can help us to make whatever we suggest more sustainable. And that then, this afternoon, brings us to the point that we can ask ourselves, how did we come that we moved from basic to applied to transdisciplinary research? Well, say, for example, we all looked at the very same picture that we just saw, an informal settlement without proper sanitation, without proper water available. The ideal environment where somebody cannot isolate for COVID. And if we only looked at pure research, then at that stage, it would have been sufficient maybe to move in only from a molecular biology side. You don't have to communicate actually with any person. You can go in and take samples and understand what's happening within these communities. That's an example of peer research. But say, for example, now we understand that there are microorganisms within this community that's making people ill. We have to understand a bit more about these diseases. And now we also want to understand what's the financial impact. Now you can start to combine economics, for example, and biology, and also some form of role player into your research. And that becomes applied research. But look at the very lowest block there in yellow. Transdisciplinary research takes it one step further. It implies that you can look at things like poverty, hunger, disease, land degradation. And it requires that you have to combine multiple types of disciplines and multiple role players to look at these complex problems together. So it brings us to a point that I have to now give you a definition of transdisciplinary research. And in fact, you will find that in literature, there are two schools of thought about transdisciplinarity. The traditional historic definition of transdisciplinarity originated from Piaget, a developmental psychologist from a Swiss developmental psychologist in the 70s, started to talk about transdisciplinarity. But it was actually Bazarab Niculescu that coined the term stronger in 1987. And he advocated that there's somewhere between what we know and the different levels of knowledge. It's this unknown middle that we need to get answers for. Niculescu said that simply reducing problems to a smaller unit to understand it is not sufficient. We have to look at complex problems in a very holistic manner. We have to be able to move from the concrete problem to the abstract problem. And we have to move in with different sets of knowledge, different skills, in a very collaborative way. So you can already hear that transdisciplinarity can never be a one-man show. It's this integration activities from the communities, society, government agencies, private industry, and academia all together. It's solution-driven. Something must happen within this research, and the output must have some form of benefit. And you must be able to transfer this back into societal practice. People must use it. The German use is a different take on transdisciplinarity in the sense of the Niculescu perspective has a more stronger focus on the epistemology of transdisciplinarity and the approach to transdisciplinarity. But the German use is a lot more practical. It is stating that it's research to identify, providing structures, analyze, and handle complex issues that can grasp what is relevant, that can explain complexity, that can be both abstract and case specific, and that can develop knowledge and practices that can be experienced and absorbed as the common good. But those are quite academic and theoretical. So let's have a look. This is now a long slideshow, and I'm not going to go through each of them in that specific sequence. But based on what you've heard so far, therefore we say transdisciplinary research is required when you need to have different types of knowledge to understand a problem. Just representing one or two or even three different sciences cannot bring you that knowledge. You need to work with people from different levels of society, academic, non-academic, and understand this problem from multiple perspectives. Transdisciplinary research, listen to this paradoxal sentence. Transdisciplinary research is necessary when you don't exactly know what is the problem. Traditionally, we teach you to first find a problem. And then if you have that problem, then find a design. Transdisciplinarity implies that we don't know the problem. We don't find these problems necessarily in academic journals. You sometimes find it beyond the traditional academic sources. And transdisciplinarity is when questions are complex. It's the wicked problems. A wicked problem refers to those societal contested problems that you don't really know what's the boundaries. You cannot really pick it up. You can't say it's just poverty or it's just this lack of knowledge. You see a tendency of something happening, but you cannot yet pinpoint and characterize that problem. That's a wicked problem. Transdisciplinary research is necessary and required when you have to have conversations within societies. You have to bring people together to talk, and you have to grasp the complexity of what's happening. You need 3 types of knowledge if you want to work in transdisciplinary research. You need to know systems knowledge. What is happening here? Why did you find it in such a condition? What caused it maybe? This is usually where you will do your traditional research, your empirical research, your survey, your interviews, your gap analysis or network analysis will happen in your systems knowledge. But then you also need to know what's the transformative knowledge. What is necessary for a group of people to get insight, to participate, to give, to be more flexible, to listen to one another. And then you also have to have target knowledge. When I'm working with a very diverse group of people, what do we want to get out of this? Because working with diversity implies that different role players want to get different things out of it. So this is an example, and it's for me an extremely illustrative slide specifically. On the top, you can see the universal research process. There are many versions. I took a version with those specific steps, but it shows to you it's a linear process, and that's how we teach you. Get a problem, read about it, make an hypothesis. If it's quantitative and applicable, then you get your design, your method, data collection, analysis, results. If you see just below it, participatory action research is now a bit more complex because you have to go back into the environment of your participants, and you have to work with them, and you have to have these cycles that you understand one another. So that's participatory action research. Already, it's effort and hard work to do participatory action research. Now view the block thereafter, an example of transdisciplinary research. And you will find in that presentation, in that figure there, that you have 2 circles in the middle, on the top, on the bottom, and you have on the sides 2 parallel processes. What actually happens is that there's conversations and research happening within society, conversations and research happening in the scientific world, researchers finding one another, and there's an integration of these research, there's a development of something new, there's an adoption of this something new, there's a training and a capacity building that happens with this research. So transdisciplinary research, therefore, is adopting some aspect of the traditional research process, deliberately bringing in the participation of people. These people are your traditional researchers, your scientists, your academia, but also civil society or government agencies, private industry. And now they have to learn from one another, and they have to collaborate and integrate to get to one research problem. And once we understand the problem, we have to look at how can we solve this problem. It's a lot of effort that goes into the process of actually getting to the point of understanding the problem. And therefore, there is a lot of challenges related to transdisciplinary research. I highlighted a few that stood out for me. Firstly, you can just imagine the difficulty to integrate different role players to work together. More practical, you have to get an engineer, a medical practitioner, a psychologist, a indigenous knowledge specialist, a communication specialist, and maybe also a member from a local political party to reach a consensus of what's the actual research problem. So that by itself is already complex. Secondly, working in transdisciplinary research implies immediately that you sometimes work with conflict and resistance. It becomes part of the daily task. People have differences, and you become the mediator to get people to understand what can be changed and what must simply be respected. Thirdly, working with different people implies different languages, different cultures within different cultures, different ways of expression, different tools and disciplines. So it's getting that new language that takes time. It's quite demanding to do transdisciplinary research. It takes time. Your researchers can become exhausted. And there's this challenge of this transdisciplinary spectrum. We see it so many times. Am I now doing transdisciplinary research, or is it actually it's interdisciplinary research, or is it multidisciplinary research? We don't know. So sometimes researchers find themselves in this spectrum that they planned for transdisciplinary research, but actually it turned out that it's not. Training in transdisciplinary research is limited. That's why we have this master's and PhD degrees within AUTHeR. It's to train people specifically to come and think like us, to come and do research with us. It's quite new. It's quite a slower career pathway, and that's just explaining that within the traditional university institutions, it takes far longer to get your data. You have a lot of multiple data sets that have to be integrated. It takes longer to get a publication out of this work and get it published. So it's a place with a lot of challenges. So ultimately, if you know now what you do now, isn't it easier to go and work in a laboratory? Well, let's see. For some people, they need to do transdisciplinary research because it's really a form of ethics and internal motivation. Some researchers have a very strong focus that they need to do research for the common good. They need to contribute to society. Their reward is to know that they do something that's beneficial, and their fulfillment is that their research contributed to the greater good. So that's the first thing. If you are interested in transdisciplinary research and you know in this gut of yours that you want to do something more with your research, and that's really part of your strong value system, then I think together we can overcome many of the challenges that I've listed so far. What skills and attitudes are required? Well, of course, you have to be open. You have to acknowledge that you will sometimes work with so many people differ and having their different opinions, and you have to be open for that. From the traditional to the magical to the religious, you have to know that people perceive things differently. Tolerance, very important. You must be able to know that sometimes you need to hang in there. You need to accept and respect. Reflexivity. Work with yourself. Ask yourself. Be critical about your own way of doing and working with people. Position. In a transdisciplinary team, there's no hierarchy. Everybody is just team members. So you have to be comfortable with that. And not everybody can be comfortable with that. Creativity. In transdisciplinary research, sometimes you need to get a form of innovative solution now. It's required from you. So there must be creativity. You are always a facilitator, moving between people and bringing people together and having learning experiences within that. Then integration and complexity. And this is difficult. It's exhausting. It's working sometimes with complex problems and having so many information that you don't really know how to extract this information into one logical discussion. It's a skill that you learn and hopefully that you master. But you're sometimes just simply overwhelmed by information. And then you have to integrate that and give it back in such a form that it's understandable for everybody on the team. Awareness of what's going on around you, and then critical thinking. I only have 2 more slides and then my time is over. So let's quickly look at the next 2 and last slides. What skills are needed from teams? Teams need to be able to work together. Not all researchers can and want to work together. But in transdisciplinary research, you can never do it alone. So select your team member that can function within a team. You need people on your team that can facilitate common learning. You cannot be in a research environment where you want to share what you've learned or know, or maybe you think there's an easier way of getting a solution to a problem. There must be some common learning. You must be willing that the team members can co-learn from one another. You have to be a bit social. A total introverted person might feel difficult, might experience that's quite difficult and stressful to link with people in a diverse team. Remain level-headed. Oh my goodness, that you can understand between all these different processes. What is my next step? What is the theoretical underpinning of what I'm doing? Where am I headed? And then conflict resolution. Yes, you have to be able to work with people with real differences and resolve those differences into such a point that they still want to work together. When it comes to behaviors, transdisciplinary researchers are risk takers. They are usually seen as a bit rebellious. They are easily bored by the traditional way of doing research. They can see an opportunity and against the institutional odds might go for it. They are created to transgress disciplinary boundaries. So they will never be quite fit and comfortable and growing just in their own discipline. And if you know a transdisciplinary researcher, you must know that this person will always try to transgress beyond what is known in that discipline. Such a researcher will not get that fulfillment of focusing only in my discipline, but I need to transgress beyond this. And this can sometimes cause conflict and be seen as being a bit rebellious within the academic system. They are very practical. They are practical in easy things that you think, how to enter a community, how to get a solution if you don't have connectivity. Suddenly we have 80 people and not 8, and they all need to get some form of food. Very diverse examples, but these researchers are usually very practical. The challenges is you need to have a solid disciplinary background. You need to know which discipline you traditionally represent. You can never remove yourself from your disciplinary background. And finally, is that it takes quite a long time for transdisciplinary researchers to get that recognition of what they are doing, whereby a fellow researcher might excel in their career faster. The transdisciplinary researcher will get that recognition in other forms, not necessarily in the traditional award or published form, but as you've seen, because it's such an interesting part of your greater good need, it's actually congruent with who you are. So this was just in a nutshell, taking you from the complexity of South Africa, these multiple problems that we have, these problems, also wicked problems with all these multiple stakeholders in this problem, and that you cannot address this just from a pure one research discipline, not only from multiple disciplines. You have to integrate multiple disciplines. You have to integrate civil society, private industry, governance agencies into this as well. I hope you've seen that it is a quite complex process, multiple steps, not just one linear research process. And this by itself brings some challenges. And that's why be comfortable to know that not every person can and will be a transdisciplinary researcher. And I sincerely hope that today's presentation highlighted to you whether you will fit in with this. And if you fit in this criteria, then welcome. You have met the right people.
Thank you,
Thank
Professor. Really appreciate that. I think we've got a glimpse into your world. I love the interplay between addressing or taking on the responsibility that life is complex. You have these wicked problems that you need to deal with, and how you go about in dealing with them. Thank you so much. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to move on to our next expert. And every time I hear this lady speak, I'm deeply impressed with how clearly she sees the basic theme of making a difference. Quite often we want to get into this narrative of what does it mean, to make a change in the community. Now, Dr. Christine Niesing is an expert on sustainable community development. But this afternoon, we are going to hear her perspectives on the social greenhouse. So, Dr. Niesing, we are in your hands.
Thank you, GP. Prof. Petra introduced a transdisciplinary researcher in detail, and I will declare upfront that I am a rebel. And yes, I like challenging people and systems, and I think that is why I fit well within AUTHeR. So I've been involved with transdisciplinary research for 13 years. I started off in communities doing income-generating community projects. I had this wonderful idea that I can change the world, with my knowledge and my willpower. And then I walked right into a wall where I realized that the world doesn't just change like I want to change it. So I embarked on a journey. And what I'm going to present to you today is actually a culmination of this journey. And me and Professor Bester developed a process called the social greenhouse. So if we go on to my PowerPoint, I'm just going to present to you an overview of what we're going to talk about today. So why do we use a transdisciplinary approach when we get practical in communities? Why is it a good fit? Then we're going to just touch on transdisciplinary theory, and then we're going to start talking about practical application. How do we do that? How do we get our hands dirty, and how do we make an impact? Because ultimately, that is what we want to do. Then I'm going to present the social greenhouse to you, going to touch on current projects that we've done, and then we've got our implications for transdisciplinary research. So Prof. Petra indicated, she spoke about wicked problems. GP also touched on it. But in AUTHeR, we are so complex that we also have positive psychologists in our team, and they hate the term wicked problems. So there's another term for that, and that is grand challenges. So these types of challenges incorporate very difficult problems like poverty, prostitution. It's those age-old problems that you read about in the Bible and that we still don't have an answer for. Transdisciplinarity is also grounded in utopian thinking, where we believe that we can see the world as it could and should be, and that we can optimally create human flourishing. I know that it's a pink unicorn dream, but I love to dream. So in transdisciplinary theory, there's a lot of discourse about what it actually is. Is it a practice? Is it about an institution? Is it a framework, a methodology, or is it a research approach? I think when you embark on this journey, you have to clarify it for yourself and kind of create your own definition that you are comfortable with. Some scholars says that it seeks transcendence of disciplinary perspectives into a broader framework in true systemic fashion. That sounds so difficult to actually achieve, and it will result in the highest form of integrated project. I haven't been part of a project like that, but hopefully one day I will. The basis of it is that it involves multiple disciplines. It involves multiple non-academic and academic participants, and it's a participatory process. The decision-making capacity is also not like in normal research, just with the researcher. The power relations shifts through the whole research process, and that's what makes it difficult and messy. The purpose of transdisciplinary research is that we seek to create sustainable change. So our whole project is based on creating a change somewhere. And that's why it's project-based. So it's very difficult to have a transdisciplinary research that's not in a project that is just continuing forever and ever. Wicked problems are rarely solved. As we go through this process, it clarifies and we understand a bit more of the problem, but we don't necessarily have an answer. Then our results, we sometimes talk about an artifact, is something very practical. It can be a policy brief, it can be a strategy, but it can also be a framework or a toolkit. But it must be something that you can take back to the community, as Prof. Petra also indicated. It has to be practical, it has to make a difference. And then the nice creative thing about it is that we can play around with different types of methodologies like design thinking. So what is important to do this in practice? You have to be able to build good relationships with people. You have to be able to establish a network. You have to be able to maintain a network. You have to be able to listen to people, to understand what they want, what they need. You have to have a bigger understanding than just in your own discipline. And you have to be comfortable enough in yourself and in your discipline to be able to hear what other people say and to understand that you are not always right. You have to have humility. It's absolutely necessity to be able to understand that I don't know everything and that I am going to make mistakes. And then you have to understand systems. Transdisciplinary research, as Prof. Petra indicated, starts with systems thinking. We have to understand what is going on in a specific context, but then you have to be able to abstract towards mutual learning. So that's the most important thing, is when you are a master's student within AUTHeR, you're going to do research in a community, you're going to teach something to a community member, but you're going to learn more than you're going to teach. You have to have the ability to listen, as I said, communicate well, and you have to also be able to communicate in different ways. This whole COVID situation halted our actual community engagement practices as we always did it. So we had to change and understand and adapt that the community lives are still continuing as always, but that we have to engage in a different way. So this was a good challenge for all of us, and I think we learned quite a lot through this whole COVID pandemic. We have to be able to acknowledge that the researcher only knows a little bit of this problem, and that we have to understand the problem from a bigger context. You have to be able to function and facilitate and manage within a team and project. And then you have to have enthusiasm, lots and lots and lots of enthusiasm. Be able to share your knowledge and learn and not impose your knowledge. So I'm presenting to you the social greenhouse process. It's a process that a social innovation process that we've developed from best practice that we've actually firsthand experienced within our projects, but also from what's written up about projects, also in formal journals. So our social greenhouse consists of 3 phases. The first phase is to understand your context. So normal research, as Prof. Petra indicated as well, we have a problem that we start off with. Where within the social greenhouse, we say, is your problem actually the problem that the community is battling with? Are you sure that that is what they want to have solved? Then you have to go and understand how that community functions. You have to go and understand which cultural practices will impact your solution. Will your solution actually be accepted in this community if it's presented in a specific way? What is your gender issues in the community? What types of capital is available in the community? We work from a strength-based approach. So we go in and identify all the assets available in a community. And to understand that, we need to understand how the social capital in this community functions. Then we do a collaborative plan with all stakeholders involved, also the recipients of the solution. So at the end of phase 1, we have a plan that all parties agree on. And then if you look at the social greenhouse, you will see that the roof is your monitoring and your evaluation, and your foundation is your sustainable impact. And that is why it forms the roof and the foundation of phase 1 as well, because that is where we already identify our indicators of how we're going to measure our impact, how we're going to measure how the project has been implemented, short-term indicators, and that flows into your long-term sustainable impact already from phase 1. Phase 2 consists of a whole process of participative design, where your community experiences the result of the research process and gives input on a continuous basis. At the end of phase 2, you have a solution that works for a specific community. In phase 3, that can then be adapted towards other communities. So just to say who we are, we render social innovation services through our social greenhouse, and we're passionate researchers who likes to stretch boundaries and rebel, and we offer realistic solutions to real-life challenges. Then we have a few non-negotiables that we want to declare before we partner with you. We state that communities are complex, sensitive, but robust. And we don't focus on needs only. We go in to see what is there to work with. We embrace the sustainable livelihood approach with the asset-based asset identification, capital, strength-based approach. And then we say that sustainability is not just a once-off thing that you measure or this cool word that you throw around to get funding. It has to actually be implemented in your project from the beginning. We state that single impact measurements can be misleading. That is why the roof and the foundation of our greenhouse is so important. We follow a holistic approach and participatory methodologies. And then we say that we bridge the community technology gap by bringing together the top-down and the bottom-up approaches. So we present in our service the need solution matrix. That is the first phase. The second phase is the participative design. And then phase 3 is the implementation of the innovation. And then we adopt it to different communities and we measure the sustainable long-term impact of the intervention. We have a support system that we call our Community Integrated Research Office. So we also want to move away from the term community engagement towards community integrated research, where we say that all of this is a holistic approach and we can't function in silos with it. If you want to know more about it, you can go and visit our website. We also have a very cool community integrated research laboratory with very nerdy, cool stuff that we use to do our research with. So to make it very practical now, I will tell you about some of our research projects. So we've partnered with the Western Cape on Wellness project, run by Prof. Frederik Maree and the Western Cape Department of Health. We've adapted it to the Northwest, and we call it our Northwest on Wellness project. It's focused on health promotion, and it enables people to, through basic steps that's accessible to everybody, to change their lifestyles. Then we've got a research project that we've been involved with for more than 15 years. Prof. Lanti will tell you more about that, our peer project. And what we did through the social greenhouse implementation is we changed it from a normal research project to a participative approach where the communities actually have a say in how this approach, how this research project plays out, and where they actually benefit from the project as well. And then we've got our COPC project that Prof. Petra ran, and where we trained 15,000 community workers. And then we've got our Ubuntu project that was born from our lockdown frustrations, where we were cut off from our communities and where we realized that we had to be able to communicate with them even though we cannot go into the communities. So you can go and have a look on our Facebook page as well as on our website regarding these projects. So the implications for transdisciplinary research, as Prof. Petra indicated, there's moments of transdisciplinarity. In a research project like this, you will work mono, inter, multi, and then you have this aha moment where you work transdisciplinary and you realize, okay, but this is worth it. You need a unique set of skills for your team. Prof. Petra indicated more in depth how it should look, but I'm just going to highlight the 6 C's. So you have to have curiosity, you have to be creative, you have to have commitment, you have to have critical awareness, connectedness, and you must be able to communicate. And then the rebel in me couldn't help bringing this out now. So we want to change. As you know, in academia, we have this saying, publish or perish. We want to change it to impact or perish. I want to read this quote to you from an article. I've put it up in my references. You can go and read it. Very insightful article. It comes from our Australian counterparts. But this statement was made in this article and it really touched me. It said, they were driven by the need to fulfill expectations of their academic institutions and to publish research at the expense of spending time engaging in the process of research itself. And if we start doing that, we lose the plot. So I want to challenge you. It is more difficult to do transdisciplinary research. It costs more and it's more difficult. And it's messy and it will take you out of your comfort zone. But in the end, you will have an impact. Whether it's positive or negative, we can't actually foresee beforehand. Hopefully, it will be more positive than negative. And then I want to just add another quote of Rosabeth Moss-Kanter, which she said in that if you want to enforce change on people, on somebody, it causes resistance. But if you make them part of the process and you give them ownership of that, it becomes a challenge and they want to take part in your journey. And then I just want to leave you guys with one last bit of wisdom, practical wisdom. I love Winnie the Pooh, my poor children. had to sit through all the movies and they had to read all the bedtime stories. But the practicality of it is that if you get into a situation like transdisciplinary research, you might be donkey kicked in the face. But sometimes that's the only way that we learn. And if we learn from it, then it's worthwhile. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to talk to you and share my excitement with you.
Thank you, Dr. Nisang. Just for clarity's sake, the transdisciplinary approach is not just a project-based one. You don't first only identify the project. I mean, you can also, from a beyond project-based, perhaps contribute to the body of knowledge, or even on just clarifying the methodology behind it, make a contribution. Am I right?
I think we want to, on the highest level, change policy on a national and an international level. And that's not project-based anymore. But you have to understand the context. And I think the difficult thing is because most of the research in the research world at this stage is done in the global north. Our context in Africa is very different. So that is why a project-based approach contributes. But as you indicate, it's on different levels.
All right, thank you. So I think we've addressed that question. We've had a question on that, and also one on why would you move towards a transdisciplinary approach, which I think you've covered, Professor. Now we're going to move to someone working, at least for the webinar's sake, from home. And it's actually quite good that Professor Lante Creer is not with us, because one of the people here is celebrating a birthday. And as a cardiovascular expert, it's good that you are not here, Professor, because there are things going on here that you should not see. Professor Lante Creer, we are in your hands and keen to listen to your perspectives on challenges in transdisciplinary research.
Thank you, GP. Well, as a cardiovascular physiologist, I will say to you, SF, may you age without any plaque in your arteries. Good, I hope you can see that. Wonderful. So, Prof. Bester started off by giving you the context of the current health situation and in South Africa. But I want to take you back a few years ago. Actually, more than a few years, a few centuries ago. I want to take you back to the 18th century, the time of Isaac Newton, when he discovered gravity. After he discovered gravity, there was a worldview that dominated the scientific arena, and this worldview was known as the Newtonian worldview. So the Newtonian worldview believed in isolated systems. Now, a system can be anything like the universe or society, communities, populations. So they believed in an isolated system, meaning that this system does not interact with its environment. It's not influenced in any way. It is closed. All variables are controlled for. There's no confounding factors that can influence this system. So this whole system is in equilibrium. However, we know that systems are not totally closed. Most systems are considered to be open systems, which means that they can exchange information and resources with its environment. So having a closed system view is extremely problematic, especially when we begin to study living systems, such as populations, societies, and communities, because none of these systems can be considered to be totally closed. Every living system exists within an environment, and it has a relationship with that environment. And as our interconnectedness across the world increases due to human activities, our influences from the external environment into our system becomes more complex. And so does our problems that we experience, it becomes more complex. And so should the solutions be that we attempt to solve these problems. So transdisciplinarity and transdisciplinary research often is linked with the complexity theory. So in simple terms, complexity theory attempts to discover how many different parts of a system interact with each other in multiple ways in order to shape that system and the outcomes of the system. Let's take obesity, for example, in adults. So our adults is our system. One would think obesity is weight gain happens when the amount of energy we consume exceeds the amount of energy we use, right? It seems simple. However, there are many complex factors that contribute to the cause of obesity. A project by Foresight developed an obesity system map with the energy balance in its center, and they took a closer look at the causes of obesity. So if one looks in the center here, energy expenditure is there, and there's more than 100 variables that directly or indirectly influence weight gain. And if one categorize these variables, it comes down to 7 themes that can influence weight gain. So it's not as simple as one would think. It just shows the complexity of phenomena like obesity. So let's say within our peer project that's been going on now for 15 years, we look at the risk factors that influence cardiovascular disease, and we saw that obesity is a serious risk factor. So now I decide that I want to assemble a transdisciplinary team to address obesity. One of the first challenges that I will face is the composition and structure of my collaborative team. Getting just the right mix of disciplinary expertise can be extremely difficult. Who should I invite to join my team? Which expertise and experiences should I include? When should I stop adding team members? Just looking at the map, you will see the levels of the themes of the factors that contributed. Means there's a big variety of people that I can include into my collaborative team. So how do I decide when to stop including people in my team? It depends. It depends on the topic that I'm looking at, the financial support of my project, the physical location of my team members, as well as my team members' interest and availability. So going through all those challenges, I finally assembled my team. So now I've got my group of experts, and now a whole new set of challenges emerges. Working with people, working with groups automatically raises group dynamic and power dynamic situations. The challenges often faced during the operationalization of transdisciplinary research include things like who will be responsible for making the decisions. This will depend on the level of participation of each member. Your level of participation will depend on the level of priority that each member assign to that health problem that will be investigated. Another challenge, power struggles. Power struggles often emerge if team members disidentify other types of knowledge as valid. Sometimes it's a matter of your work is interesting, but my work is important. So getting that balance right, so that, and having the ability and the skills to mitigate and address these challenges. Another challenge often experienced is diverse perspectives. If I can take you back to our map, if we have to choose one of these 7 themes to focus our attention on, which one would you suggest is the most important? For me as a physiologist, I would say the biological variables are the most important, and we should start there. Here, Pierre, you might disagree, and you might say your expertise in marketing and communication might direct you to lean more towards variables related to media, watching television, advertisements being placed, etc. A psychologist might say, no, that the psychosocial part is more important. So it depends on each team member's perspective. And how do you come to an agreement on a research plan and the way forward for your research project to go ahead? Another challenge often experienced is varying priorities. So team members might have varying priorities for researching the particular issue, and consequently advocate for diverging starting point and directions of inquiry. Let's say, for instance, you are the health promotion officer for the Department of Health. So your motivation for driving a specific part of this research will depend on your agenda as set by the Department of Health, for example. So depending on your agenda and what your priorities are, that will also lead to managing these challenges. Another challenge is methodological challenges. How often do we experience that when we come to in collecting the data or going about, people say, no, but this is the best way to go about is quantitative, using quantitative methodologies, or the best is qualitative research methodologies, or should we use both? And also the epistemology that also surrounds each discipline should be taken into account. Another challenge is lost in translation. So let's be honest, scientists are not the best communicators when it comes to speaking in lay-term language. How have you ever experienced asking someone for an explanation, or what is your research about? And they explain, and you just nod and you just say, no, that's good. And also your communication, taking into consideration, transdisciplinary research is about involving a layperson, community members in your research. How do you communicate to those community members on a level that they can understand and that they can communicate back to you as well? So, in short, to conclude, despite the many benefits associated with transdisciplinary research, it also comes with challenges. Challenges arise given the fact that a diverse group of members, which includes scientists, researchers, academics, community members, policymakers, as Christy mentioned, come together to tackle some of the world's most complex health issues, wicked problems, from a variety of mindsets, values, life experiences, ideologies, as well as perspectives. And if these challenges are not approached correctly, transdisciplinary research can result in many conflict situations. However, if one identifies these pitfalls and challenges beforehand and address it accordingly, transdisciplinary research can be one of the most exciting approaches to use for creating solutions to some of the most complex health issues faced by populations. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Kriya. I think the addition of people just adds on to the complexity of the work that you do. It just compounds the one issue after the other. And because you work with you work a lot with transformative knowledge, that you need to change something. You need to contribute towards change. There's a lot of creativity that goes with it, and of course also then creativity in managing these different relational aspects that you highlight. Professor Kriya, thank you so much for your contribution as well.
Thank
All right,
you.
ladies and gentlemen, we've reached the end of the webinar. You can hear that in the health promotion environment, transdisciplinary health is quite the challenge. And I think that, as we move forward in South Africa and beyond the current situation, we'll see more and more that these issues need to be addressed in a truly transdisciplinary manner. Thank you to our experts who participated today. It was great having you here. You really contributed. And ladies and gentlemen, if you are interested in any of the 4 postgraduate qualifications on offer at AUTHeR, please make contact with us. We are more than willing to help and assist on your journey to become more than what you are now.